the floor to questions, if anyone would like to ask some. And I just wanted to also say, well, I remember the grass species that I slipped my mind when I had my seniors moment. So it's Themeda triandra, or in Australia it's called kangaroo grass, but each country has their own colloquial name for it. But it's a very hardy grass that grows in a lot of these dry, ultramafic areas. So we have 7 minutes before we conclude, so this is a good opportunity. But I think the presentations really indicate that we really have to, we have the opportunity to harness our biodiversity resources in order to face some of these challenges that we have with the way we've tipped things off the scales. But I also want to firstly also say to the co-speakers, thank you very much. We're the guinea pigs of the PAASE parallel sessions, because we were the first ones off. So I'm sure that we've accepted the patience and perseverance of our audience. And I think it's an opportunity to report back to the executive committee and saying, well, sure, we have sort of gone a bit over time, but that doesn't matter. It's not, we're not hampered by the challenges of having to follow a schedule, because we've all been in lockdown. So the opportunity to give space to what everyone has to say, I think is very important. So I'm glad we have Nina Cadiz, who is also chairing a session that I invite people to join later on next week. And she has some very interesting speakers too.
Job?
Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you certainly can.
I would like to address this to Dr. Ago.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'am, I know you did a lot of work on transplanting. Maybe you can advise us on the best way how to go about with it.
Just like the advice of Dr. Doronila before, we have to study the succession of species. So it is still good to introduce or to plant the secondary species like the grasses, the sedges, and even we can consider non-indigenous species for the beginning, but we have to manage them well, that as time goes by, as the soil is recovering, the general vegetation is recovering, then that's a time for us to plant or introduce the natural species, which can actually hyperaccumulate heavy metals. So we just follow the lessons from nature. Start with the secondary species, perhaps from grasses to herbs, and then our more special species like the ones that they discovered, the Phyllanthus, the Rhinorrhea, etc.
Thank you. I fully endorse what Dr. Ago said, that we really have to really push ecological thinking in what we do. So I think this is a pervading theme in the work that Dr. Macandog and Dr. Perez also show, that unless we have a grip of how ecosystems work, even our proposals and recommendations really will bound to fail, because we oversimplify systems. And so the more we introduce the capacity of an ecosystem to be resilient by adding everything, not just one or two so-called star species, we create monocultures that are always bound to fail. Thank you. So I think Vito has a question here. This is a question to Jem. So Vito says, do you have any backup plan in case we have extended lockdown? I hope you can continue your research on ornamental fishes. It is quite fascinating.
Yes, so I do have a backup plan but it's not necessarily related to the genetic diversity and connectivity. The thing is, when we try to do these genetic studies, we really have to get samples. So if, let's say, we're not able to get samples, I think one of my backup plans is one of my chapters will be focusing more on just looking at vulnerability of these marine ornamental fish species, and then looking at just establishing the conservation status. There's this idea that I learned, or the concept that I learned when I was still working in UPMSI, where, you know, we can't really know how to take care of something if we don't know what we have left. So if we don't really know the conservation status of these marine ornamental species, then we don't really have a starting point for how we're going to maintain their sustainability. So one backup plan for me is to look at pushing for determining the conservation status of most of these marine ornamental fishes if the DNA stuff doesn't work. Another option that we can do is just to look at contemporary connectivity. So if we're able to establish that, say, for example, you have marine ornamental fishes that you're collecting, let's say, in Batangas, if you can find any DNA connections or connections with their genes between your population in Batangas and then I guess another population in Puerto Galera, then maybe we can say, oh, they can replenish each other. So that's another thing that we can do. So if, let's say, the albatross samples don't work, we were not able to get any DNA from these mummified fish. I think one other option for us is to just look at connectivity between the populations.
Thank you. Yes. And I think Vito has another question for Renee. Where is it? This is Vito to Renee. Renee, what is the future plan for your research? Hope you will continue in this interesting topic.
It depends on the funding, to be honest. So there are a lot of thoughts that we have actually gotten into as a continuance of what we are doing. There are a lot of understanding on uptake mechanisms that we need to cover up before we can actually do more. You have also a lot of plans on rehabilitation. Again, this is constrained by funds. If it's actually provided, it could be very helpful. These are the short term goals that we wanted to have. And maybe for longer term goals, the rehab component will be a project that can be done for a few years in the future. Maybe that's the way we go.
So Jem, you want to read out that question, Jem?
May follow the question.
Oh, yes, Ma'am AKR, please.
Yeah, I actually posed a question for Dr. Rene. I asked him why there's so many accumulators that are available, yet the companies are not using them. I don't know how this is an issue. You know, we were into the bioremediation group 10 years ago. It still is the issue, and mining companies should be funding all these rehabilitation activities. The other issue is what to do with the biomass. Again, it was discussed before that maybe incineration could be an approach. Right now in Congress, there is a bill which is being sponsored to lift the ban for incineration. I attended the hearing, but there were so many against it. They said that incineration, you have to put filters to avoid the release of toxic compounds in the environment, but that is very expensive and may not be applicable to the Philippines, they said. So I don't know, what will we do with the biomass once the heavy metals are accumulated? Still an issue. a
Yeah.
decade ago, still an issue. What do you think, Rene?
Thank you, Ma'am Raimundo. Actually, we did some experimental studies on recovering the metal from the plants, particularly copper and arsenic. We are not familiar with nickel for now. Before, we thought of incineration as a process, but the other was Picard actually discouraged that method. So they look into the wet analysis or extraction. So the use of acids. So that's what we are looking now. So we can actually extract copper using nitric acid, digesting it with nitric acid, and also with arsenic. So it can be done, ma'am. It can be done by not burning. For nickel, I'm not so sure on how the process would be. So if there's a support on a bigger scale, we want to experiment on this on a bigger scale. Maybe it can be a possible or feasible way of extracting metals from the plants. So there's a way, ma'am. There's a way. So I think we're still hooked in doing this. There's another question you asked earlier. Why are not the mining companies using these hyperaccumulators in revegetating their abandoned mines? Actually, we did an experiment on that at Manila Mining. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, it was the plant care project that was a challenge to us. It is quite difficult to transplant because it should be a personal, there should be some personal touch maybe that can be inputted for plants to grow. Otherwise, I think more than 50% of your hyperaccumulators would eventually die. That's a challenge, man, for us.
You need a botanist in the group.
Yeah, you need a botanist for that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, can I add to that question? Because what Ma'am AKR says is a very valid point. But another thing that we have to think beyond the box is these plants are really remarkable because they can withstand such serious insult, if you like, physiological insult. Therefore, we have to try to explore what are the metabolomic processes that are occurring, because if we are able to understand that, we can even think that this can be possibly used for medicinal purposes. For example, the French have started doing some research on the enzymatic processes in some of the nickel hyperaccumulators of New Caledonia. And they have already patented some of these, processes, because they realize that these are in fact, they are marketing it as eco-nickel or bio-nickel, because you can actually use those enzymatic processes for other feedstock, for other processes which can be much more valuable. So you might only need, let's say, 1 kilo of leaves from a nickel hyperaccumulator to create, let's say, glutathione, which is an important antioxidant. So this really asks the question, we have the capacity in the Philippines with our biochemists, our chemical engineers, to really try to understand, unpack these processes to produce something which is probably so much more value adding.
Okay, thank you.
And I think there is a question here from Amelita Luna for Dr. Claveria. Are there any shrubs or small trees that can absorb high concentrations of both copper and nickel, copper and arsenic, other than local ferns?
Unfortunately, we did not encounter larger plants, I would say, or shrubs that can actually hyperaccumulate copper and arsenic. We tested a few, especially those metallophytes, the general metallophytes, that they grow also in toxic areas. Although they don't accumulate any of these metals, they just grow there and survive. But they do not absorb most of these metals. So we don't use them as our are examples or species for experiments. So I'm not sure. Maybe Hope can help us identify some of these larger plants that can accumulate copper and arsenic.
Yes, copper is a particularly difficult metal to deal with because it is very toxic to living tissue. But I think the Chinese have been doing some work where they have actually some mass planting of some copper hyperaccumulators. And if you're interested, I'll send you the references of the work. They're mainly from South China, so the same type of climatic conditions as us. Now, I think there is a question here from Dr. Leticia Afwang. So, Jem, can you say what Dr. Afwang's question is?
So her question, this was posted on Facebook. She was asking, do we have data on the extent or impact of remediation on mining wasted ecosystems?
I think Imam AKR can answer that. She's been a champion to try to make sure that these places are actually remediated.
What was that? Dr. Afwang was asking about the impact.
She was asking, do we have any data on the extent or impact of remediation on mining wasted ecosystems?
I think there are there are studies on this, and just the protracted the study of Dr. David of UP Diliman. They have really studied the impact of the mining industry in Bicol. There are available data, but I don't have it on hand now. But of course, it's affecting the environment. So just let me know. We'll get together at IBS for that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I think we'll unfortunately have to draw proceedings to a close. It's been a wonderful session, both sessions. I'm really appreciative of the speakers in really sharing something of their passion in the research that they have done. And I think you can all see that there is an application in all this. And really, as PAASE's outreach is really to make it relevant. And really, when you think that in this situation of lockdown, it really has provided us the opportunity to concentrate our efforts in really providing a voice and saying what we should really use these hard-earned skills in many ways for the betterment of our Filipino people in our country. So without much ado, I would like to thank everyone, and perhaps, Jem, we could coordinate one more group photo before we go, and then we'll leave it at that.
Yes, let's do that right now. I'll just switch everyone to gallery mode again, and everyone can turn on their videos so that we can get a picture. And we want to say hello to the people who are watching on Facebook right now. There's 37 of them. Kanina, we reached up to I think 60 plus. So thank you for also viewing this on Facebook. All right, so does everyone have their, I think some people still don't have their videos on.
Tina is there, yes. Amelita Luna and Nina. Vicky Migo.
All right.
We're almost there.
Okay, wait a minute. All right.
Okay, there's Nina.
Wait
yes,
for some people
yes.
to turn on their.
I like your background, Nina.
Thank you, Yob.
All right, I guess we can do it now. I'll just press screen, print screen. Hi, everyone, smile. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Siguro before we end, I'll
Thank
also
you.
just play the video for PAASE as an ending. But thank you guys for coming.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Great.
very much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Demi.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes. Hi, Nina.
Bye-bye.
Oh,
Thank you.
see you sa July 27.
Yes, I look forward.
Inviting all of you.
Okay, bye. Thank you, Yob.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll send you all an email.
Ano, Rene. Okay.
Bye.
Ma'am
Thank
Chen.
you. Thank you, everybody.
So, Jim, how do we save the chat? Could you save it for me? Because I don't know how to.
Yeah, I can save it.
So I can for the report. Thank you. Maraming salamat. You know, this was a wonderful effort. Yes, Joel. Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. I'll get in touch with everyone. Yes.
Get in touch.
Thank you very much, Jim. I think we were able to do something very important.